I still remember the exact second my front door creaked open. Slow, deliberate, the kind of sound that makes it clear whoever is entering wants you to know they believe they belong there. I was standing in my own kitchen, coffee halfway to my mouth, when my sense of safety shattered. I didn't scream. I didn't even move, because what I saw next didn't make sense. A stranger was standing inside my house, holding a clipboard, looking offended by me. Let me explain how my quiet morning turned into the most unbelievable confrontation in my life, and why she made the single worst assumption anyone has ever made about me. I had moved into that HOA neighborhood less than 6 months earlier. Clean streets, identical mailboxes, the kind of place where neighbors smile politely while tracking everything you do. I kept to myself. No loud parties, no complaints. Just early mornings, late nights, and a life I intentionally kept private. I didn't socialize. I didn't attend HOA meetings. I barely knew anyone's name. That, apparently, was my first mistake. She was known around the neighborhood. Everyone had stories. The woman who measured grass with a ruler. The woman who knocked on doors without being invited. The woman who spoke in rules and fines the way some people recite scripture. I'd seen her once before, from a distance, standing across the street and staring at my house like it personally offended her. I ignored it. I shouldn't have. That morning, I had deliberately taken the day off. No court, no hearings, just silence. I was barefoot, dressed casually, windows open, enjoying the rare calm. When the door opened, my first thought wasn't danger. It was confusion, because she didn't sneak. She didn't hesitate. She walked in like she owned the place. She cleared her throat loudly. I turned. She stood there in a pastel blazer, a tight, rehearsed smile on her face, clipboard pressed to her chest. She scanned my kitchen like she was inspecting spoiled meat. Her eyes moved from the sink to the counters to the coffee mug in my hand. Then she shook her head. "I knew it," she said, scribbling something down. I asked her who she was. She sighed. Actually sighed like I was wasting her time. She told me she was with the HOA and had received multiple complaints about my unit. She said she was there to conduct an inspection. Not ask, not request. Conduct. I told her to leave. She laughed. Said homeowners like me always said that when they had something to hide. She pointed at my cabinets, asked if they were original, asked why my trash bin wasn't concealed, asked why my kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. Every word felt intentional, calculated, like she was testing how far she could push. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. I told her again that she was trespassing. That's when she dropped a line that made my stomach turn. "You people never read the bylaws." You people. In that moment, I realized this had nothing to do with inspections. This was about control, power. She believed she could walk into my home because she believed I was beneath her, just another quiet homeowner she could intimidate. I reached for my phone. She told me not to bother, said she'd already reported me, said fines were coming, said things would go much harder for me if I didn't cooperate. She positioned herself between me and my own doorway, daring me to challenge her authority. What shocked me wasn't just her confidence. It was her certainty. The absolute belief that she could do this and face zero consequences. That I would fold, panic, beg. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was amused, but because she had no idea who she was standing in front of, and she had just documented her own worst mistake. She took one last look around my kitchen, snapped a photo with her phone, and told me I'd be hearing from the HOA's legal department. Then she walked out like she'd won. She didn't know the next letter sent wouldn't be meant to intimidate me. It would expose her. The letter arrived 2 days later. Thick paper, bold lettering, stamped with authority it hadn't earned. I knew what was before I opened it. What I didn't expect was how aggressively wrong it would be. According to the HOA, I had failed inspection, violated multiple bylaws. I would be fined daily until I allowed a full interior review. Interior, like my home was a public facility, like the woman who walked into my kitchen, hadn't just trespassed. I should have been angry. Instead, I was fascinated, because every sentence told me one thing clearly. She hadn't backed down. She'd escalated. That same afternoon, my doorbell rang again. Not once. 3 sharp presses. I didn't answer right away. I watched from the side window as she stood there, clipboard under her arm, flanked by a man I'd never seen before wearing a polo with the HOA logo stitched proudly on the chest. She was smiling, the kind of smile people wear when they think the outcome is already decided. When I opened the door, she didn't greet me. She stepped forward, pushing toward my entryway like the last time hadn't taught her anything. I blocked the doorway with my body and asked what she wanted. She handed me a printed notice and said she was there for a mandatory follow-up inspection. Mandatory. In my home. Without a warrant. Without permission. I said no. Her smile vanished instantly. She said refusal would be documented. Said non-compliance would lead to legal action. Claimed she'd already spoken to HOA counsel. Then she leaned in closer, lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret, and told me people like me always try to bluff until they were forced to comply. That's when the man behind her spoke up. He said they could involve the city. Fire safety. Sanitation. He said inspections like this never ended well for homeowners who resisted. It was rehearsed. A pressure tactic. Good cop. Bad cop. Except neither of them had actual authority. I told them calmly that if either of them stepped 1 foot inside my home, I would call the police. She laughed again. Police never side with problem residents. Then she raised her phone and started recording me without consent, narrating out loud, calling me hostile, uncooperative, suspicious. Something shifted in my chest. Not fear, not anger, recognition. I'd seen this behavior before, in courtrooms, on witness stands, in people who mistook bullying for confidence. Then she crossed from arrogant into reckless. She claimed the HOA had the right to enter any home under community protection clauses. Said judges had upheld it. Said she knew the law. That's when I asked her a single, calm question. Could she point to the clause? For just a moment, her confidence cracked. It was brief, almost invisible, but it was there. Then she recovered, waving her clipboard aside and saying it wasn't her responsibility to educate residents. She told the man beside her to start taking photos. He immediately began snapping pictures of my front door, my windows, my porch, documenting everything as if he were gathering evidence for a crime that didn't exist. That's when the neighborhood started paying attention. Curtains shifted. Phones came out. People slowed their steps. She noticed the audience and adjusted instantly. Her voice grew louder. Her posture became exaggerated. This wasn't just for me anymore. She announced that my home was officially under review, that the HOA would make an example of non-compliance, that residents who believed rules didn't apply to them always regretted it. I told her to leave my property. She refused. Instead, she promised enforcement, attorneys, consequences. She pointed her pen at me like a gavel and told me I had no idea how serious this was. And then she crossed a line that changed everything. She said people like me always collapse once court became involved. I told her calmly that court would be a very bad decision for her. She smirked, mocked me, told me to enjoy the fines while I still could. As she walked away, she didn't realize I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to stop her. I was going to let her continue, let her document more, let her dig deeper, let her build a case so arrogant, so careless, and so legally indefensible that when it unraveled, it wouldn't be a warning. It would be catastrophic. She returned exactly when I expected, not with lawyers, not with police, with confidence. 3 mornings later, a bright red notice was taped to my door. Final warning. Interior access scheduled. Failure to comply would result in legal escalation. Her signature sat at the bottom, bold and oversized, like she wanted it remembered. I didn't remove it. I didn't respond. I went about my day as if nothing was happening. At exactly 10 the next morning, 3 cars pulled up, HOA logos everywhere. Clipboards, folders, jackets. She exited last, sunglasses on, chin raised, already rehearsing her victory. This was no longer about inspection. This was about humiliation. She wanted to break me publicly. She knocked once, hard. I opened the door calmly and stepped aside. For the first time, she hesitated just slightly, Then she smiled and walked in like she'd been invited. 2 board members followed, phones already recording, voices low but excited. They expected resistance. They expected panic. Instead, they were met with silence. She launched straight into her speech. Violations, authority, consequences. She spoke of legal precedent, enforcement power, how quickly courts would move. She said my refusal had forced her hand. She said she hoped I'd learned my lesson. I let her finish. When she finally stopped, I asked her to sit. She laughed, but she did. Everyone did. Something in my tone made it feel less like a suggestion and more like procedure. I opened a drawer, removed a leather folder, and placed it on the table, sliding it toward her. She frowned and opened it. Her expression shifted instantly. The room went silent. She turned a page, then another. The color drained from her face. Not panic yet, but confusion. The moment right before reality crashes in. She looked up and asked what it was. I told her. I told her I was a federal judge, that I had served for over a decade, that I kept my life private because authority follows you home if you let it, that her inspection was illegal, that her letters were harassment, that her recordings violated state consent laws, that her signed threats were now evidence. 1 board member stood immediately. Another asked if this was a joke. It wasn't. She tried to speak, failed, tried again, muttering about not knowing, about assumptions, about misunderstandings. I reminded her that ignorance doesn't erase misconduct, especially when it's documented and repeated. I told her I had already forwarded everything to the HOA's legal counsel, the city, and an ethics board that reviews abuse of authority. I told her she wouldn't be hearing from my lawyer. She would be hearing from several. She began crying, quietly at first, then openly. She said she was just doing her job, under pressure, that she thought I was hiding something. I told her she was right. She had been hiding something. Her power depended on fear, intimidation, and people not knowing their rights. That belief ended in my kitchen. Her position was dissolved within a week. All fines were voided. A formal apology went out to every homeowner she had targeted. Lawsuits followed from others who had been too afraid to fight back until they saw what happened. I stayed in the house another year. No one ever knocked again. And sometimes when I make my morning coffee, I look at the doorway where she once stood, so confident, so certain she was untouchable, and I remember how fast authority collapses when it finally meets the law. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe. Every subscription helps me bring you more dramatic HOA stories. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss an upload. I'll see you in the next one, where justice is even more satisfying.